Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm sorry if it sounded a little confusing to most of you. I hope my talk is going to smoothen out a little bit of it. The title of my talk is Changing Tracks and an unconventional route beyond the lab to integrate people, processes, and platforms to accelerate healthcare solutions for the next billion. So before I go on, I want to say that this is something a path which probably you do not come across every day. And so I'm also going to be explaining to you why the different path came around and what was it that I didn't initially plan for when I started my degrees in BSc, MSc, and so forth. Till that time, it was pretty much straightforward. So this is the career graph that I have had, during the years. I did my BSc, MSc, did my PhD in 2006, and after that I joined as a research scientist in a CSIR public-private partnership. I was there for 6 years, and going by the conventional route, I did managed to get some government grants. I got the Young Investigator grant, I got the DST grant. I also managed to mentor a few PhD students, a few MSc students. During the time, I also became a guest faculty in many institutes. So this is something that probably something that was predictable, I was comfortable with. And then something happened. Then I decided to take off and try something different, and I'll tell you why that happened. So my perception and aspiration of research was a well-funded research institute, with a good capacity and where I get to do some cutting-edge work, some really good publications and patents, which I did manage to get during when I was an in-lab scientist, as I call that phase of my life. But then, when I came to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences for my PhD, this is something that happened and which I was not prepared for. I was not prepared to see so many things that I saw in AIIMS. And as a non-medico, I was not trained to handle this part, right? So although we were working in a very good funded lab, I was under the mentorship of Professor Bhan himself. And we were working on the rotavirus vaccine, which is now in the news also. So, but I was not ready to see all this, and this somehow something triggered, And when I came out of the lab and I saw patients sitting, I used to go for imaging facility in the emergency room and see the worst case scenario over there. I wondered what my role as a researcher was, what I was doing inside the lab, in an AC lab with very many good facilities. But what is it really reaching the people where it was supposed to be initially for? And that really triggered me off, and I never looked at research the same way that I did when I started my career. So like most of us, I had a very straightforward route to what I'm going to do, but this experience somehow changed the way I looked at research forever. So this is something that I think that we do is initially, think a lot in silos of what things should be, and probably it looks like something that it was supposed to be, probably doesn't. A paper leads to another paper for validation, for it forms the basis of another paper, and so forth. It does definitely add to the intellectual capacity in that area, right? And we get to do a lot more based on what our predecessors have done. But when we look at the graph of what actually happens in the lab and what really translates outside, that somehow doesn't add up. And probably there is a different way of doing that, is breaking the silos and working in a more cross-disciplinary way, and also interacting with people probably who are not from your field, and talking and understanding a lot about what you are doing. That gives a better perspective of what you want to do finally. If you are in the company of, suppose you're a cell biologist or imaging specialist and you're interacting with your peers, you do not get to know what is happening in the other field, which you can probably plug, you know, and it can take your work further. So we are working in these silos, and we need to kind of break out of those silos and do it to be able to make a more productive pipeline for what we are doing, you know, make it more meaningful. That was my thought process. And the question that I started dealing with after this initial thing is there a better way of doing research and it translates to the beneficiaries faster? Can people for whom it is, you know, it is intended for, be directly involved in some way? The third question was, can there be a self-sustaining ecosystem which can then be put in place so that this kind of a pipeline moves on irrespective of you? That is, I think, the biggest contribution that anybody can give in terms of translational medicine or translational research is how do you set a pipeline, but to make it function, it doesn't require your continuous inputs. That means you are the focus there, right? You want to make, you are the hero, but you want to make the entire pipeline the hero so that it sustains itself irrespective of whether you are there or somebody else is there or so forth. So how do we do that? And how do we actually get those people involved for whom, you know, we started working for? We say tuberculosis, we say so many diseases which are very rampant in our population. The infectious diseases are rampant in our population. But we seldom get to interact in a way that they become part of what we are doing, or many of us don't even meet the sample, where are the samples coming from, for example. So is there a way to inclusive growth? And what do I mean by inclusive growth is that expanding the opportunity for people at the base of the pyramid and involving them in what you are doing. And currently what we are doing is focusing on this aspect. We are, as enterprises, for example, the entrepreneurs, the researchers, we are sitting here in well-funded labs where we can do all these things. But we also need to focus on something, how we can engage these people to make it more meaningful for us in terms of taking it forward as well as even contributing to what we are doing. So beyond, the bottom of the pyramid is actually now being described as the next billion up. So we started the foundation called A Million for a Billion, and as the introduction said, it mandates to empower a million to impact a billion. That's the very first time we've drafted that sentence, it sounded a little too ambitious to us also, you know. But then we thought that why not? If we develop a model in which we are able to do that, it's not such a big deal. So we started A Million for a Billion Foundation, and that is the mandate. And how we thought of positioning ourselves is at the interface of these. So that comes to, so we are dealing with these who are developing expertise and developing solutions which are actually intended for this community, but it hardly goes there. So we are trying to bridge the gap so that this goes here and the information from here comes here. So it becomes a kind of an interactive system, a sustainable system. And there are ample opportunities to do this. We are a very young population, a very digitally savvy population, and we are getting, we are increasing in number at 10 million in the workforce every month. And so there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of schemes and policies in place now by the government, which makes it even easier for us to access this particular population. And the impact that can be created here is enormous instead of just working here. But it requires a lot of innovation. It requires a different mode of thinking. It needs coming out of the silos, right? So when we are doing R&D, we are developing an assay, or we're developing a product or a drug, it requires us to start interacting in a way which is different from what we are doing right now. And that is, that is the undercurrent of the initial thought process of, is what I'm doing today, does it really matter for the people to whom it was intended, it initially started for? So the undercurrent is how, it's like, I'm here, they are there, how do I bridge the gap? With that undercurrent, it is definitely possible, but it cannot be possible with the way we think. And that was the mandate by which we started the foundation, as interacting with people to co-create, to co-evolve a solution from the researcher's point of view, and also how the people can meaningfully engage from the communities that these solutions are meant for, in a way that it is easier. Like one very, a kind of a very, an example which I love to quote everywhere is, while writing papers, we still quote US figures and European figures. We are such a large population, why don't we know enough about ourselves to be able to quote our own figures? That is because we are doing research, we are doing, we are doing epidemiology, we are doing product development, we are developing assays, so forth, but really not understanding what is happening in our own population. And we are, and we are depending on figures from outside to even extrapolate what is applicable in our population. I have a little hard time understanding how we can continue doing this and make an impact. And we typically follow a sequential way, that we'll develop this and then we'll think about doing a pilot or taking to the field. Then we'll come back to the drawing board again and start. So it's like work in progress, right? How do you make it more efficient so that it goes forward? That is still the undercurrent. So this can be done by, not by a single individual, but by creating an ecosystem. An ecosystem has multiple players. It is not an individual play, it is a team play. How can research be more like a team play rather than individual, right? And in the team, it is not this, so even if you play football, if you play cricket, the team members do not have the same capacity, or the, somebody is a good goalie, a good goalkeeper, somebody is good at, defense. So even when we play sport, we have a very varied team, and that what drives a team to a goal or a success. Why aren't we doing that in places like this, where this can really take it forward? Why do we have people of the same capacity and capability in the same team? How do we plan to go forward with that? We need more people, more minds to develop solution in this space. Again, reminding the undercurrent is, how do we take this forward together? The framework that we evolved is basically a Snowflake model. Anybody heard of a Snowflake model? Snowflake model, anyone? Okay, one person. So here, the thing is that you don't need many of us to make an impact to many of them. That is the Snowflake model. One person impacting 10, who further impacts a 10, or further impacts a 10, 1 million, 1 billion. Doesn't sound that ambitious anymore, does it? No. So can we change the approach by how we work? And here again, being a primarily young population with a lot of ideas, with a lot of energy to do, and that is where we in the foundation work. We work with a lot of young individuals who are fellows with us, and the fellows are based on the project that we are implementing. So it's a medical project. We have medical students, nursing students as our fellows. We have an assay development or an epidemiology project. We have a lot of science fellows with us. We have something which requires a different mode of thinking. We have engineering fellows. So we work in different spheres, but we are primarily trying to focus and harness the energy and the zeal and the adaptability of the young in making this happen. So we have a lot of fellows who are supported and trained by our team, who work with the local partners And these local partners, besides these, the local interns whom we work with are again young graduates or with the capacity or the capability, right? The engineering graduates. You have so many engineering colleges. Did you even know there are so many engineering colleges in tier 2 cities, tier 2 towns? And according to a survey, engineers are the most, if you read the newspapers, that is the highest number of people who are going to be unemployed or underemployed, because they are not adequately trained in the field, plus they incorporate a huge population in tier 2 cities and villages who are educated but underemployed or unemployed. We are trying to engage with such people who have the basic skill set and can do projects with us. Then we create rural entrepreneurs who can take these solutions forward in their community in a sustainable way. So the guys over there don't have to come here. There is a pipeline which they can access to reach the target audience in a sustainable way. On the other side, these people leverage the same network to have better opportunities in the cities for themselves while staying here. So everybody stays where they are, but with the efficient Snowflake model, we are trying, it is a kind of a crosstalk, which is mutually beneficial. We are currently in 5 countries, but most of the work that we do is in India and the US. We are just 2.5 years old, and we are a 501c certified organization. And this is how we've trained the rural students in the rural areas as well as in the urban settings. Again, just keep in mind the undercurrent is how do you make it efficient, how do you take it forward. That is the undercurrent of all this. Setting up Gurukuls in 4 states currently in collaboration and in partnership with the Tata Trust, and also the UN Women and UN Habitat, which have a strong mandate of supporting such initiatives. You know how UN Women has a mandate that how do you empower women in rural areas to be independent financially. Can the solutions that need to be taken be anchored by such a woman who is trained and can anchor it and also provide, earn from it herself? So these are the different permutation combinations that we work with. There are various activities of the Gurukul, and I'm just going to cite a few success examples, but at the back of it also reminding, which the first speaker said, to get to even these, you have to face a lot of failures. So I'm just citing the successful examples that we had, but this is backed by like 10 things which did not work. So it's ongoing, but where it works, it is a solution that will sustain. It is a solution that will take the process forward, will take that thinking or the solution to the community where it is required. So not going too much into it, it's just that it goes across the board from solar energy to agriculture to biosensors. In healthcare, we see a tremendous opportunity. We are a population, we're such a huge population, but the doctor to patient ratio is among the lowest in the world. Most of the doctors are in the urban area, which constitutes only 35% of the population, about 30 to 35% of the population, and very few for the majority, 65 to 70%. So there's definitely an area which can be connected, solutions can be provided in a much efficient way if we just think not unidirectionally but a little out of the box. This is what you would have seen many people talking about if solutions are to be taken in terms of the technology, but this is something which is seldom done till the stage that you get the initial pilots and so forth, and then everybody starts thinking, okay, how do you make it portable? Can this co-evolve by having people in your team with different skill set who can help you develop this as you go forward? So again, backend aims, are we reaching the people that we desire to? The main trigger of at least for my personal journey for not going the conventional way is finding solutions in terms of creating processes and train people to be able to do that. This is just a photograph of the communities that we have worked in a small number of, excuse me, in a small span of time, we have had moderate success. We have worked with a lot of people, a lot of startups who are desirous of getting into the space, and we have helped them evolve, pivot, and pilot their work. We've also worked with a lot of researchers who want data from the field. And I'll just give you one example. I'll just cite one example. So the main thing that I'm trying to get to it after all this is this. Be stubborn about your goals, but be flexible about your methods. So, it's, for me, science, I wanted my research to mean a little more than what I was doing at that point of time. So I thought that going by the conventional mode, that is not happening. And I tried to evolve something different. That's why I started my talk by saying that probably you will not get such unconventional examples because this is not such a conventional journey. If you see my LinkedIn profile, and my previous speaker just mentioned that, that how many of us on LinkedIn, I have a very nice way of describing it. LinkedIn is a professional platform where researchers are not present. So you will not find, because they are university pages, and you have university pages, you have consortiums and so forth. Again, LinkedIn or any such platform, I'm not just saying LinkedIn, that gives you a kind of cross-disciplinary audience to interact with, not necessarily in your field, but I created my LinkedIn profile while I was doing my PhD, and my LinkedIn profile looks like this. I describe myself as a scientist, an entrepreneur, a writer, and a columnist. Confusing, right? The positive feedback will be great. The negative feedback will be not focused, right? But I'll tell you how it all plugs in together. So my initial thought process made me go from an in-lab scientist to an open lab scientist. Now I don't define my work to be in a particular geography within a particular building. I describe it as opening many multiple labs where I can work. And we are creating capacities in these areas where these things can be taken forward. But yeah, I started my talk by saying something about my research work. What happened to that? I started describing the process. What happened to my own research work? So early on, I was fortunate to get a DBT grant right after my PhD. I got a young investigator grant, and we developed an assay on genomic signatures. And by genomic signatures, I mean, identifying panel of markers on the genome which will act as a signature for a phenotype or a susceptibility trait. We designed that during my DBT project, and we validated that on mass spec. Now the thing is, I can't take a mass spec to Chittoor. I can't take a mass spec to do my assay in a village called Mori, which is in Andhra Pradesh, right? But the assay will be immensely useful there. So is there a way in which these assays, and this is just an example, can something like this be accessible to them in the first place without being labor intensive, where you are sending a person, get the sample to the lab, assay, send the results back? So now I have my own individual DST grant where we are doing a strip down technology of how such things which are coming out of the lab be made available in an affordable way to people where it matters. So again, my research work continues in the backend. We just secured 2 big DST grants. One of them deals with developing strip down technologies for rural market, and that is where my research is headed now. The other things, I'm just giving you a few examples to show you the diversity of the things that we are doing. So this I'm doing with CARE, where I also consult as a senior research scientist. We are co-developing the strip down technology there. We are prototyping. Now, I have nothing personally to do with it, but there are some solutions which are coming out of a lab in Santa Clara University, and it is for people in the rural community, and they do not want to invest that entire pipeline of somebody engaging, employing, and tracking. So they are leveraging our network to be able to do that in an efficient way. And this is, by the way, a team project by students, and the institute stands by them, and they have forwarded it to us to take it to the field and give us the pilot data. Another, Dr. Siddharth Kundu, he's a doctor, and he's now, he converted to a mathematical biologist, right? And he likes to talk about it in a way that his medical science has enabled him to develop better mathematical models and simulations. We are helping him pilot a little bit of his work in the work. So this is looks like a totally theoretical project, but we're helping him do the experimentation with the framework that we have put forward. With CARE, we are also partners, and we're developing skills in the community. This is Dr. Somaraju. He's a very well-known cardiologist, and he's the chairman of CARE Hospitals. We are co-developing skill center in Andhra Pradesh, where people will be able to get trained, get efficient community level data. So hopefully one day we are able to confidently quote Indian statistics, test different concepts, and also train village citizens on the concepts and how to execute them. So again, undercurrent is how do I take it forward? Now, I showed you my snippet of my LinkedIn profile, which says writer and columnist. Now that doesn't look very different when I have spoken about all this. This work does not happen if you read about, or you at least keep yourself updated on many things that are happening around you. And I have this thing that whenever I learn something or I read about something, I like to take notes for myself. And that's taking small notes converted into writing articles. So what I'm doing on the field, I'm actually also started writing about it. So now it doesn't look like confusing, right? It doesn't look like, it somehow goes together. It's just a matter of being open to what are the things you can potentially do rather than defining yourself into things that you have to do. So if you just keep an open mind in the sense that, let me see what are my core expertise, where is the thing that I can, what can I do better than anybody else, rather than trying to understand and learn something so that I can do as better as. So I have this philosophy that we're always trying to better ourselves and coming up to the mark of something else. But we do not, as my previous speaker said, reflect enough to see that what is the core thing that we do better than the other people, and that we can develop ourselves to do it even better. So something that I started with just taking notes, I'll just take 1 more minute, please, sorry. Converted into writing articles. And as a result, I became a columnist with the NRDC, the National Research Development Corporation. They have a magazine called Invention Intelligence and Nano Digest. And guess what I'm writing on? I'm writing on the startup ecosystem, which is very, very different from my training, right? But not so anymore. I'm talking to so many startups. I'm getting to know the space so much better to be able to see how they can translate their work forward. So I started writing about it. It doesn't seem so different anymore. I also contribute to the India Science Buyer, which reports out cutting edge work coming out of Indian laboratories, which do not hit the limelights beyond the journals in which they are published. We write it in a way that it is simplified for a lay person to understand. And that enables cross-disciplinary interaction. If you're writing in a scientific term, even if you have a multi-talented team, you have to convey it in a very non-technical way to be able to get through to them. So that is where I started writing, and that helps me keep myself updated of what is happening. So this is my selfish motive. I get to read articles which are just published out, and I get to write about them, also learn a lot from them. So after having said that, I would just like to conclude that we have also been able to get some kind of attention. We have presented the models to the CM of Andhra Pradesh, under whose umbrella we were actually working in Andhra Pradesh. We have also presented at the annual 1A1B event, which we host every year in March, April at the United Nations. We have been covered by these for the work that we do. We have both I and my co-founder, both of us have spoken at TEDx. We have been covered by these organizations. We've represented 1A1B and spoken about our work. We are fortunate to have many partners with whom we associate for different level of expertise and know-how and implementation. Thank you.